Tonight, the most famous and mysterious First Lady in American history is ready to speak to you. The woman who refused interviews, dodged the paparazzi, and kept her secrets for half a century, left behind 8.5 hours of audio tape about her life.
I mean, it's so strange these things that come back.
The history she witnessed in the White House.
He just put his head in his hand and he started to cry, just with me.
The people behind the politics.
This man with this enormous ego would have been just enraged and blocking Jack in every way.
She is wickedly irreverent.
Bitter, kind of pushy, horrible woman.
Analyzing the man she married.
Jack was young and loved everything.
And the marriage they made. And how a shy girl who loved books and hated campaigning becomes a new symbol of American power, studying the dangerous players on the global stage.
You'd seen just naked, brutal, ruthless power.
A wife who bore the grief of a nation remembers a pledge she gave her husband when the world was one chess move away from nuclear war.
I said, please don't send me away. I just want to be with you, and I want to die with you, and the children do too.
Tonight, Jacqueline Kennedy tells her story. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the voice we never thought we'd hear, the private history we never thought we would learn. Almost 50 years ago, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy went silent after she left the White House, refusing to give press interviews. So it was stunning to learn that only 4 months after her husband's assassination, she sat down and quietly recorded more than 8 hours of audio tape about their time together and what happened at the White House. Those tapes are now included in a new book, Jacqueline Kennedy, Historic Conversations on Life with John F. Kennedy. And by the way, that is how she pronounced her name, Jacqueline. We think these tapes are surprising, and as you're about to see, a portrait of a young woman who grows up believing she's one kind of person, only to discover she is another. They are also the story of someone who was a witness to history and ended up making history herself, a first lady deciding that her country would lay cultural claim to the American century. So now, it is time to begin. After all these years, Jacqueline Kennedy, ready to tell us who she really was. The setting is her house in Washington, where she lived for a few months after moving out of the White House. Her living room with its pale yellow chairs and favorite pictures on the bookshelves. As the tape recorder turns on, you hear the sounds of children in the background. Caroline, age 6, John, age 3. There are ice cubes in a glass. A match lights up her cigarette. And the time capsule begins to open. We see them again. The young couple who once held the promise of a brand new century. A young man filled with nerve and swagger. His luminous wife, lit by the sun, unaware they are racing toward tragedy. Again, it's just 4 months after his death, as she speaks in that singular, intimate, breathy voice.
I mean, it's so strange, these things that come back. I always thought with Jack that anything he could make, once he was in control, anything, all the best things would happen. In this childish way, I thought I won't have to be afraid when I go to sleep at night or wake up. It's so strange, these things that come back.
And so she takes us there the day it began. The morning of a freezing cold inauguration, January 20th, 1961.
It was like children waiting for Christmas or something, getting up and getting dressed, and the snowstorm, all the excitement.
He is 43. She is 31, the youngest president and first lady in history, taking over from Mamie and Ike. The Eisenhowers, the oldest couple in the White House, who have come to symbolize the conformity and conventions of America in the 50s. As her friend, renowned historian Arthur Schlesinger asks her questions, she emerges as a skillful and irreverent diarist of what people in the photos are really thinking.
What did the president think of Eisenhower?
Well, not much. You know, Jack saw that all that could have been done. I mean, how really he kept us standing still and gave away stuff. I don't think he thought much of him.
And the sweet-faced grandmotherly Mamie, what did Mamie think of her?
Didn't President Eisenhower say during the campaign, whenever Mamie thinks of that girl being in the White House, she goes, "Sss," or a raspberry or some charming sound? You know, there was this sort of venom or something there.
As they leave for the ride to the Capitol, the amused young newcomer notices Mamie seems to have forgotten that Kennedy is the first Irish Catholic president.
I was sitting in the car. President Eisenhower and Jack came out afterwards. She said, "Look at Ike in his top hat. He looks just like Paddy the Irishman." And then I think she went. Then wore the inauguration.
During the ceremony, we saw only her unchanging smile.
Mr. Robert Frost.
But it was she who had invited the first poet ever to speak at an inauguration, Robert Frost, who was faltering in the blinding sunlight.
It was such a glare from the snow that he really couldn't see what was written in the paper.
I'm not having a good light here.
And he looked like he was going to cry. And then Lyndon got up and held his hat over it.
Yeah, let me have it.
The 86-year-old decides to recite a poem from memory.
Such as she was, such as she would become, has become, what she will become.
And though we can't see it, she is in fact like radar scouting out friends and adversaries on the podium. Near her, their bitter rivals in the election, outgoing Vice President Richard Nixon and his wife Pat, working hard to smile through the bruises from that brutal defeat where they lost by 16/100%.
I remember Mrs. Nixon, who looked really pretty that day. I thought if you could see she could really be rather New York chic when she wanted.
Right.
In sort of a black Persian lamb coat and hat.
She watches next as her husband, the president, strides to the podium to deliver that soaring new vision for the nation.
The torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
He issues a clarion call for America to defeat the march of communism. And he calls for a new frontier of economic progress, fighting poverty, civil rights.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And everyone says, "Why didn't Jack kiss you after?" Which, of course, he would never do there. But you had to march out in such order that I was about 8 behind him with women or something. And I so badly wanted to see him before the lunch, just to see him alone. I went to a room with all the ladies where they had sherry and coffee, and he was with the men. And I caught up to him in the Capitol, and I was just so proud of him. And there's a picture where I have my hand on his chin, and he's just looking at me, and there really were tears in his eyes. Suddenly a flash came, because I didn't think there was anyone there. And in the papers it said, "Wife chucks him under chin." I mean, that was so much more emotional than any kiss. Because his eyes really did fill with tears. I'd just say, "Oh, Jack, what a day." Then we got in the car for that parade. Sort of not quite knowing how to wave.
Yes.
A brand new path ahead for all of us, even though in our middle-class nation, it wasn't easy to fathom this new First Lady. So golden and exotic, a debutante who grew up on a Newport estate and even spoke foreign languages on the campaign trail.
Pour mejorar las condiciones
Je suis d'origine française.
Tutti fuori per la bella accoglienza. Grazie. People came up and used to be surprised that I could speak English.
It's only now that the tapes reveal what was behind that finishing school smile. The dazzling Mrs. Kennedy was filled with dread.
It's funny, I used to worry about going into the White House. It'll be a goldfish bowl, the Secret Service, I'll never see my husband. I spent so much time worrying, would it ruin our marriage to get in the White House?
She was intimidated, frightened. After all, she'd never been a natural in politics. A plane from decades ago roars overhead.
I was always a liability to him. Everyone thought I was a snob from Newport who had bouffant hair and had French clothes and hated politics. And he'd get so upset for me when something like that came out. And sometimes I'd say, oh, Jack, I wish, I'm so sorry for you that I'm just such a dud. And he knew I loved him and I did everything I could.
It has only been 2 months since she gave birth to John Jr. by cesarean. She had put on a brave face for the star-studded receptions, the first time all of Hollywood would come to celebrate presidential glamour. There's Angie Dickinson and Frank Sinatra singing that old Jack Magic.
That old Jack Magic has them in its spell. That old Jack Magic that he weaves so well.
But she's just too tired to watch all of the inaugural parade, and by inauguration night doesn't know how she can make it to those 5 inaugural balls. In the 1960s, the pep pills of the day are amphetamines, readily prescribed by doctors.
When it was time to start getting dressed, I couldn't get out of bed. I just couldn't move. And so I called up Dr. Travell, just frantic. And she came running over. She had 2 pills, green one and an orange one, and she told me to take the orange one, so I did. And I said, what is it? And then she told me it was Dexedrine, which I'd never taken in my life. But, and then I never have again. But thank God, it really did its trick. Because then you could get dressed, and then Jack came, and he came upstairs, and he brought me down to the Red Room. We all had a toast of champagne, and he liked how I looked, and he said something so nice, and we went off to that ball. There's that wonderful picture of him sort of pointing. It was like Cinderella and the clock striking midnight. I guess that pill wore off, because I just couldn't get out of the car. And so Jack said, you go home now, and he sent me home with that aide. Sometimes I thought later, I wish I'd been able to sort of share all that night with him. But he had such a wonderful time that he must have gotten home about 3 or 4, but he came in and woke me up. And I slept in the Queen's room. He slept in the Lincoln room then, so that was his first night in Lincoln's bed. And, well, he was just so happy. Then the next morning when he woke up, very early, well, I was awake too, and so I went in that room, and it's the sunniest room. We both sat in that bed. I mean, you did again feel like 2 children. Think of yourself sitting in Lincoln's bed. I don't know. And he went off with that wonderful springing step to his office, and then again. Life with him was always so fast that it isn't until you look back that you see what happened when.
Coming up, the reality of life behind those White House doors.
You really become the kind of wife that you can see that your husband wants.
And the woman who signs on for one kind of life and discovers she has to chart another. As the tapes roll, you hear the sound of little John Kennedy, age 3, barging in on his mother's conversation with historian Arthur Schlesinger.
Thomas, what did you do today?
I don't know.
Was Caroline with you?
No, I want to turn the sound on now.
On the tape, his mother remembers the first days when the White House woke up to the tumult of a president with little children.
He'd get up at 7:45, reading 50 morning papers. And I always thought it was so funny for people who used his bathroom that men could use after dinner, because all along his tub were all these little floating animals, ducks and pink pigs and things. And you'd hear this roar, full blast of cartoons. And it was this awful exercise, man.
Jacqueline.
1, 2, 3.
And he'd be telling Caroline and John to do what they were doing, so they'd be lying on the floor. He loved those children tumbling around him in this sort of sensual is the only way I can think of it. Then he'd always come in before he went over to the office. You know, come into my room. I mean, I'd only be half asleep or else I'd be having breakfast.
This was his bedroom, a simple, small bed. At the time, most presidential couples had separate bedrooms. But walk out down a private hallway, and it's her bedroom. Yards of silk, a canopy. On one side, a firm horsehair mattress to help him with back problems. Her favorite photos everywhere.
You know, Jack, I think a woman always adapts, and especially if you're very young when you get married and, you know, are unformed, you really become the kind of wife that you can see that your husband wants. For instance, my sister's husband loves to bring his problems home. They're all business and leaders and understand that. I mean, I would have been a terrible wife if I tried to pick his brains about that. You know, if Jack wanted to do that and talk about things at home, then I'd be asking him questions.
One time, she tried to ask him something about Vietnam.
It was at the end of the day, and he said, "Oh my God, kid," which was, it sounds funny, but I got used to it. It was a sort of a term of endearment that I suppose his family used. He said, "I've had that, you know, on me all day, and I just see he'd just been swimming at the pool and sort of changed into his happy evening mood." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Don't remind me of that all over again." And I just felt so criminal. Mm-hmm. And I decided everyone should be trying to help Jack in whatever way they could. And that was the way I could do it the best. By making it always a climate of affection and comfort and détente when he came home. The children in good moods.
Did she discipline you?
She just had the
look. Can you do it?
No, I couldn't possibly do it.
Caroline Kennedy remembers too.
But I could recognize it if I saw it, and so could John. So we would laugh about it and be like, "I got the look." Yeah.
But she wanted to make this formal public house a home, taking them out to splash around in the famous fountain on the White House lawn.
And then we would also get to make phone calls, and we could call our grandparents, or we could call Santa Claus. So it was just the most fun time of the day.
Then, every afternoon, the president would come home for a nap.
I'd sit around while he got dressed. That was my hour instead of the children's.
The two of them finding their way now that his boundless confidence had taken them to the White House. He manages to push through the Peace Corps, tries tax reform, but it stalls. So does healthcare reform. And then, 3 months in, confidence shatters. Historian Michael Beschloss.
JFK was a stranger to failure, mostly. He was, in a way, a sitting duck for the CIA to say, "We've got this great plan to invade Cuba." He did not yet have the kind of knowledge that would have allowed him to say, "This is going to be a failure."
The Bay of Pigs. You can see what's happening from his notebook in one of the meetings, the circled words, decision, decision, decision. The Eisenhower CIA has lured him into signing off on a plan to have exiled Cubans invade communist Cuba and provoke an uprising. He's too green to ask the probing questions and exposed that it is doomed. The exiles invade, Castro is waiting. More than 100 die, 1,200 taken captive. They so brave, and after all his bold talk, he knows he has left the U.S. looking underhanded and inept.
It was in the morning, and he came back over to the White House, to his bedroom, and he started to cry, just with me, you know, just for one, and just put his head in his hands and sort of wept. And it was so sad, because all his first 100 days and all his dreams, and then this awful thing to happen. And he cared so much. He didn't care about his 100 days, but all those poor men who you'd send off with all their hopes high and promises that we'd back them, and there they were, shot down like dogs who are going to die in jail. And then Bobby came to see me and said, please stay very close to Jack.
Victory has 100 fathers and defeat is an orphan.
Historian Richard Reeves.
And the reason he looked so confused and inept was because he didn't know the plan, because there was no plan.
Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin.
He changed the structure of the White House after the Bay of Pigs to bring Bobby closer into him, to not depend on the generals in the same way. And she was able to analyze the various people that he was meeting and see with clinical detachment almost what their strengths and their weaknesses were.
Eventually, he negotiates a prisoner release, and when the battered Cuban exiles gather to honor him, he brings her to speak in words they understand.
Entre un grupo de los hombres más valientes del mundo.
There they were sitting with Jack, nothing bitter, just looking on him as their hero. That was one of the most moving things I've ever seen.
Still ahead, when she first met the bachelor dazzling Washington, how romance met reality, and someone we know is about to take revenge.
I couldn't stop crying for about 2 days.
At the Kennedy Library, Caroline Kennedy gathers some of her favorite things, including a sword she and her brother always loved to play with.
When you open it up, it's curved. So this is a bracelet that he picked out for her for their 10th anniversary.
He was so sweet. That's terribly simple gold of sort of a snake.
And I think that it's just so mystical and beautiful.
She always knew that inside a vault there were tapes her mother made as part of a larger oral history project on the Kennedy White House. Difficult as it was after the assassination, she wanted to do her part.
She felt that JFK had been robbed of the opportunity that most presidents get after they leave office. You write your memoirs, you give speeches defending your administration, and so on. She felt that because he couldn't do that, she had to.
Well, I don't think people should forget President Kennedy. And all this effort that was made for 2.5 years. Is it just going to be forgotten or ended? Or is some way going to be found to make it keep going?
After her mother's death, Caroline and her brother read the transcripts, but she only listened to the tapes recently, saying the years have somehow made it less painful to share her mother with the world.
When we were early married and then later.
Because her brother had died too, the decisions about release were up to her.
I just don't like her a bit. It always looks like she's been sucking a lemon.
When to release them and what to leave in, including the caustic comments about public figures from Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King is really a tricky person.
To LBJ.
Him up there with that enormous ego.
You decided not to edit them? Must have been very tempting.
Yeah, it was tempting, and I can hear her voice in my mind throughout that decision, which was, like anyone, oh, I can't believe I said that, or I wish I'd added something, or I changed my mind later. But I think it's really important to realize the value as well as the limitations of an oral history. And once you start making changes, it's what do you do? And it's not my oral history. So I really felt an obligation to history and to carry out what she had done.
And so she says she decided that this year, the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's inauguration, she would release the tapes. They are in a book called Jacqueline Kennedy, Historic Conversations on Life with John F. Kennedy. Her mother's gift of history, as she wanted it told for him and for the world.
I think that she also was deeply patriotic, and she really felt that her time in the White House was a privilege, and she wanted to do everything she could to both record it and preserve it and be worthy of it.
When we come back, a newlywed and political novice tries to master the public life she never planned.
You're pretty much in love with him, aren't you?
Oh, no. I said no, didn't I? Jack was young and loved, everything.
He was the first
Arrogance, girls, in all the best senses of the word. Jack was the most unself-conscious person I've ever seen. He just naturally could be attractive in a crowd or a room. He was unself-conscious about walking around with a towel on if it fell off or something. He put it on again, but it was like, had many things in common with so many sides of you. Everyone found a part of them in Jack.
When Jacqueline Bouvier met John F. Kennedy, he was already a war hero who had famously pulled his crew through shark-infested waters to safety on an island. He was also a congressman about to become senator, Washington's most eligible bachelor, famously irresistible to women and ready for the conquest. Several times he met but barely noticed a shy girl with short curly hair working for a newspaper. She was a kind of bookworm. The family beauty was her sister Lee, who married a Polish prince named Radziwill. Finally, he asked her out, and she met all those brothers and sisters in his family, so unlike her own.
The Kennedys taught me all this, Jack really, all this questioning. If you didn't get on the offensive, they'd have you on the defensive all night. And so these questions he'd ask me or my sister. So once I asked him how he'd define himself, and he said an idealist without illusions.
His father, Joe Kennedy, one of the 75 richest men in America, took the shy but witty young girl under his wing.
I always thought he was the tiger mother, and Mrs. Kennedy, poor little thing, was running around trying to keep up with this demon of energy and seeing if she had enough placemats in Palm Beach, or should she send the ones from Bronxville, or she put the London ones in storage, or, that's what her little mind went to pieces. And she loves to say now how she sat around the table and talked to them at Plymouth Rock and molded their minds, but she was really saying, children, don't disturb your father.
Historian Michael Beschloss.
These were extroverts. She was an introvert. She once said that perhaps the Kennedy way was better than hers. She said, when bad things happen to the Kennedys, they go out to a restaurant, they play touch football, they see their friends. I, on the other hand, when something bad happens to me, she said, I tend to go inward and into a spiral of depression. It was a very big influence on her.
And she and the dashing congressman had something in common. They both loved reading about great civilizations, people, ideas.
He'd read walking, he'd read at the table, at meals, he'd read after dinner, he'd read in the bathtub, he'd read, prop open a book on his desk on his bureau while he was doing his tie.
And to show her devotion when he's curious about some history books written in French,
he gave me all these French books and asked me to translate them. And I'd stay up all these hot nights translating these books, all on Admiral d'Argenlieu and Ho Chi Minh and the Anamites and the Mennonites. Gosh, I had to be married for my contribution to that.
But a year and a half have gone by and he's still openly going out with other women. It's her mother who decides he'd better choose.
She was living at my grandmother's, translating all the books, and I think he was trying to work it into his busy schedule, and then eventually her mother was quite clear that they needed to get engaged.
And so they marry. But from the start, the young political wife has trouble finding the boundary between public and private.
You want to be with him?
Yes.
You're pretty much in love with him, aren't you?
Oh, no.
These are outtakes from an interview with NBC's Chet Hundley that never aired.
I said no, didn't I?
Yes, you did. You want to do it again? You are pretty much in love with him, aren't you?
I suppose so.
We certainly got that impression.
Is that what you're going to say, is I suppose so?
I've ruined it, haven't I?
At first, she's fascinated, meeting all the people in politics with names you would never find on a social register in Newport, like Onions Burke.
And then there was another man with Onions Burke named Juicy Granera.
Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, those names just fascinate me so. You know, and sort of see that world, and then you'd go have dinner at the Ritz.
John Kennedy is something new. John Kennedy is something fresh.
But soon the romance gives way to reality.
Jack was away every weekend, and so you'd have 3 or 4 days a week, 2 of which you'd be tired.
Tired, and he had a series of secret illnesses, a disease of the adrenal glands, and debilitating back pain. He tried radical surgery. An infection brought him near death.
Just seeing Jack in pain used to make me so sad all the time.
In Bobby's introduction to Profiles in Courage, about half his days on this earth spent in pain.
Yeah. Oh, once I asked him, I think this is rather touching, if he could have one wish, what would it be? In other words, you know, to look over it and looking back on his life. And he said, I wish I had had more good times. And I thought that was such a touching thing to say, because I always thought of him as this enormously glamorous figure who I married when he was 36. I thought he'd had millions of gay trips to Europe, girls, dances, everything. And of course, and he had done a lot of that. But I suppose what he meant was that he'd been in pain so much. Oh no, it was awful. Years campaigning, living in a milkshake and a hot dog. He had also
Stomach. Yes.
Medical reports indicate it may have been colitis or celiac disease.
He had also, you know, stomach trouble, which gave him a lot of pain sometimes. But all his family have it. It's just a Kennedy stomach. I mean, it obviously comes from nerves.
And another sadness. The young wife knows her husband wants a big family. But first, she has a miscarriage, and then finally, she is 8 months pregnant with a daughter she plans to name Arabella. They have their first home, and she prepares a little nursery. But the doctors don't want her to travel. He heads for a vacation on a yacht in the Mediterranean.
He flew to Europe to stay with his father and just rest a few days in the south of France. Then I lost the baby, and he came back to Newport a couple of weeks. And when I lost the baby that I, you know, made nurseries and everything for there, I didn't want to live there anymore.
Her brother-in-law, Bobby, is there to make the funeral arrangements. It is 1960 and the grueling race for the presidency. With so many people wary of his youth and Catholicism. By now, she is the mother of a 2-year-old, Caroline, and pregnant with another child, though she tries to do what she can.
Do you like a man who answers straight, a man who's always fair?
Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin.
They wanted to keep her off the trail in 1960 because she didn't look like Mamie Eisenhower. They thought the country wouldn't take to her.
Our country of suburbs, Ozzie and Harriet.
It sure is a good dinner, Mom.
Poodle skirts and one kind of cheese.
But I mean, that shows he wasn't thinking of his image, or he would have made me get a little frizzy permanent and be like Pat Nixon. And, you know, and Pat and Dick, and he never would hold hands in public or put his arm around me, or, you know, because that was naturally just distasteful to him, as I think it is for any man. So he didn't do anything for his image. And, you know, he used to tell me, sometimes he'd tell me I should wear hats instead of and there were all these letters about my skirts too short. And I said, but they're not too short. And he said, oh, I guess you're right. But, you know, he never said lengthen them. He was never, can ask me to change, which I just think was so nice about him.
And the morning after they win, in the closest popular vote in history, she doesn't know what hit her.
You know, it was just a madhouse. The press in Ethel's house, all those women saying, what kind of first lady will you be? That conference in Florida where Caroline walked in with her shoes on.
Caroline breaking into a serious press conference at Palm Beach, wearing her mother's shoes.
And only 16 days later, after she gives birth to John Jr., 1 month early by cesarean, Mamie Eisenhower exacts a kind of revenge on the young First Lady, issuing a command invitation while she's still in the hospital.
And I got out of the hospital about noon, and I didn't want to go. I'd never done anything but walk around the room. And just to be boring after a cesarean, it's very hard to walk and all that for a while. Like a fool, I said I'd go. I wish I hadn't. And then they said they'd have a wheelchair and everything. And there was never any wheelchair. And you just were dragged around every floor and not even asked to sit down. And brought in and out of past all the press. She was very funny. She always referred to it as my house and my carpets. And when I got back, I really had a weeping fit. And I couldn't stop crying for about 2 days. It was something that takes away your last strength when you don't have any left. So that wasn't very nice of Mrs. Eisenhower.
But life is filled with rivers that carry you where you least expect it. Coming up, her triumph. The new couple is making a mark on the White House. Black jazz musicians are now rocking the East Room. And she persuades a reluctant Pablo Casals, the most famous musician in the world, the great cellist, to play in the East Room too. State dinners are changing. No more Eisenhower cheese sauce and coleslaw. She brings in a French chef to impress the visitors. When President Sukarno of Indonesia visits, he shares his art collection in a book.
Every single one was naked to the waist with a hibiscus in her hair. And you just couldn't believe it. And I caught Jack's eye, and we were trying not to laugh at each other. I mean, you know, trying not, I was so off, but Sukarno was terribly happy, and he'd say, this is my second wife, and this was... But he was sort of, I don't know, he had sort of a lecherous look.
But the incessant scrutiny and lack of privacy in the White House is even worse than she imagined. Comedian Vaughn Meader skewers the family in the fastest-selling record in U.S. history.
I'm your wife. I should like to ask the following question.
No, speak English, Jackie.
It's been a long time since a president and his family have been subject to such a heavy barrage of teasing.
I thought it sounded more like Teddy than it did me, but...
Again, the president seems to have shock absorbers. She does not.
I mean, I thought it was so mean. I didn't care if they made fun of me or anything. But when they made fun of little children...
I had my hand up first.
You did not. I had my hand.
When I explained that to Jack, I just felt so strongly about those children. It was hard enough protecting them in the Kennedy family, where some of the cousins, especially Eunice's children, were so conscious of the position and would always wear Kennedy buttons and would play that record, My Daddy is President. What does your daddy do?
What does your daddy do?
I hid all those things from my children and always taught them that the White House was sort of temporary. I'm so glad I did for the way it ended.
But privately, the White House is teaching the new couple the lesson it seems to teach every president and his wife. The Oval Office is at once so public and so isolating.
Mr. Kennedy always said you can always, if you can count your friends on 5 fingers of one hand, you're lucky. And I have the friends I always knew I'd have.
She routinely escapes the White House, spending time at a 400-acre estate in the hunt country of Virginia called Glenora, where she can ride horses and hide from all the cameras.
Daddy told him, keep her riding and she'll always be in a good mood.
And by the way, she never really liked the title First Lady.
She thought it sounded like a
A racehorse, yeah, or a saddle horse, yeah.
You know, sometimes at the end of the day, you just feel one jump away from tears, but you wanted to be so cheerful for Jack when he came home, which I nearly always was, but he could see when it was getting to be a bit too much.
Just the tension of having to do something so much of the day for a person who was much more used to having space and having time, being able to go and read whenever she wanted to, or read her poetry, or write a letter to somebody. And maybe it was depression that was being felt when the tension came, or maybe it was just being overloaded.
We had a White House that looked like a bad convention hotel. Windows that were sealed, hadn't been open in years. She said that she felt like a moth banging on the glass of the window.
Previous administrations had given away or even sold White House antiques. The new couple was mystified by something the Eisenhowers left behind.
In the White House, in the sill to Jack's office, we thought there were termites. It was the cleats from his golf shoes. You just wouldn't believe. I guess he must have just walked all around the White House in them.
So she had an idea. Maybe she could use all this attention on her to hit up rich people in the country to donate money and prized antiques to restore the White House. Her husband thought it was a political landmine.
He said, you just can't touch the White House. Look at the Truman balcony.
This was the White House before. All the Trumans added was a second-story porch, but it created an uproar. Yet for some reason, the usually uncertain political wife said she was going to do it anyway.
Do you think it surprised him how she emerged in the White House? Suddenly?
I think it surprised her.
She made her move on donors.
You know, people weren't going to give up good pieces of furniture, or you'd have 99 cups of tea with some old lady and she'd give you $50.
And the girl who loved books and history used her scholarly passion and hours of research, studying engravings, finding the French-inspired antiques of Monroe and Madison.
She helped America to come of age. After World War II, we were the only superpower in the world, but the symbols didn't look that way.
You can see her notes. Only the Lincoln bedroom, she says, is not to be changed. The end result, staggering. These are iconic White House rooms, the East Sitting Hall before and after. The Yellow Oval Room before and after. And then she decided she would show the house to Americans on TV. It was unprecedented. All three networks, 80 million people watching, a sensational success.
When we first came here and started searching for old things, we found the pier table in the carpenter shop where it was being used as a sawhorse. So we took us 6 weeks to restore it. And then in the men's room downstairs, we found that bust of Washington. These two pieces are exactly where Monroe had them in the room, which we also learned from studying old engravings. Oh, the White House television tour he used to watch all the time. He was so sweet the way he was proud of me. I was so happy that I could do something that made him proud of me. Because I'll tell you one wonderful thing about him. I was never any different once I was in the White House than I was before. But suddenly everything that'd been a liability before, your hair, that you spoke French, that you didn't just adore to campaign and you didn't bake bread with flour up to your arms. Then when we got in the White House, all the things that I'd always done suddenly became wonderful. And I was so happy for Jack that he could be proud of me then. Because, you know, it made him so happy. It made me so happy. So those were our happiest years.
And suddenly, in that room so long ago, something happens. When she is talking about happiness, we notice the tape stops just for a minute before starting again. We are left to wonder why. What went on in that silence? What did the interviewer see in her eyes? As we return, Jacqueline Kennedy is about to begin a new journey of discovery. More of the tapes held in a vault for decades and now released in a new book. She is talking to her friend, historian Arthur Schlesinger, 4 months after her husband's assassination, her children playing in the background.
Was Caroline with you?
No, I want to turn the sound on now.
We have already learned that this most mysterious First Lady, who did not give interviews in her lifetime, in fact thought she was a liability to the most accomplished political family in America, the Kennedys.
I'd say, oh, Jack, I wish, I'm so sorry for you that I'm just such a dud.
She had been shy, raised in Newport society, loved books, her privacy, and the most eligible bachelor in Washington.
Jack was the most unself-conscious person I've ever seen. He was unself-conscious about walking around with a towel on.
At the White House, she tried to raise her children under all that scrutiny. Their playground, the fountain on the South Lawn. And she tried to be there for her husband as he fought debilitating back pain and then devastating failure, the Bay of Pigs.
He just put his head in his hands and he started to cry.
As we've resumed the tapes, she has just started to find her voice, surprising everyone with that White House tour.
We had such a great civilization that so many foreigners don't realize it.
She's ready to make her move on the world. As we've resumed, Jacqueline Kennedy has become an object of complete fascination in America.
Every item shown is examined in the light of the new First Lady's taste.
Women want to entertain as she does.
Il est 10 heures?
Oui, il est 10 heures.
There is even a 30% increase in college students trying to learn French. And we are a nation of bouffant hair and pillbox hats all the way to the Flintstones.
There's that Jackie Kennel Rock look.
Did the clothes matter to her? Because all America
was obsessed.
Obsessed.
I know. I always remember watching Mr. Ed.
A horse is a horse.
And the women on Mr. Ed were always trying to look like Mommy, and I just thought it was so hilarious. I mean, obviously she liked to look nice, but they weren't what mattered the most. I think that they were important for what she was trying to accomplish.
It was something the Kennedy family probably never foresaw. The political novice has become their biggest political asset.
It was the first time we had a First Lady who in any way resembled a movie star. And in a subtle way, she understood how powerful that could be.
She had read all those books showing that great civilizations conquer not with military power, but the power of their culture. Here, she describes the reaction on their first trip to Mexico.
It looked like a pink snowstorm. And they keep thinking of new things to yell vivas about. Viva Kennedy, viva Los Kennedys Católicos, viva everything.
She is determined to claim the new century for America, taking on the French titan of World War II, General Charles de Gaulle.
De Gaulle was my hero when I sort of married Jack. I told him how much Jack admired him and made up some completely
harmless flattery for the hero she now discovers has become a bitter, cranky snob.
And he really sunk down because I think he was so full of spite.
But look at her, you'd never know what she's really thinking.
I loathe the French. There's not one French person I can think of except maybe two very simple people. They're really not very nice. They're all for themselves.
As the president campaigns with de Gaulle to get a nuclear nonproliferation treaty, she has a campaign of her own.
I'd ask him things of history, like who did Louis XVI's daughter marry, the Duke of Angoulême, did she have any children, and this or that.
And when de Gaulle assumes the White House advisor McGeorge Bundy is a young provincial,
and de Gaulle said to me rather imperiously, "Et qui est ce jeune homme?" in very slow French that you would say to someone who might not speak it. Mm-hmm. And Bundy answered in this brilliant French. I was just so proud. Mm-hmm. It was strike one for our side. Yeah. A first run for our side.
She is such a success in Paris that when the meetings are over, de Gaulle announces he has reevaluated his opinion of the president.
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
You cannot imagine him ever saying anything like that at any earlier stage of his career.
Later that evening, the Prime Minister and his daughter arrive at the White House.
Next on her list, Nehru of India, so vital to the fight against communism in Southeast Asia.
They'd warn whenever Nehru gets bored with you, he taps his fingertips together and looks up at the ceiling. And Jack said he'd been there about 10 minutes when Nehru started to look up at the ceiling.
But she and her sister Lee charm him on a trip to India, despite the open contempt of his daughter, Mrs. Gandhi, who is insulted that it's only the First Lady who comes, not the President.
She is a real prune, bitter, kind of pushy, horrible woman. You know, I just don't like her a bit. It always looks like she's been sucking a lemon.
Back in Washington, the president takes on U.S. Steel for raising prices in a weak economy and declares America will win the race to the moon. But the stress means his old back problems return.
The president is on crutches.
He sat in his desk without moving for 6 weeks. He didn't walk around the driveway, he didn't swim, and suddenly his back went bad. He'd lost all the muscle tone. So then it was awful because he was really in pain. Dr. Travell would pump him full of Novocaine, and finally we got, out.
Why?
It was really the boat that relaxed him the most. And Jack was sitting in the back in a black sweater, the hair, wind blowing his hair, blissfully happy with fish chowder. And I was inside with 2 blankets on, drinking hot soup. That's how cold it was. He just thought, you know, everyone would love that boat because that was his away from care. He really taught Caroline to swim. He was saying, come on, you can make it. And he told her all these stories. He'd make up the white shark and the black shark.
He would make people throw their socks over and the socks would disappear, and he would say, see the purple shark? Look, the sock is gone. And I would say, oh, I see. And I think I just saw him. Mommy took a lot of notes about those stories, and which I have, which are great.
Whenever Jack saw it was getting me down a little bit, he'd really send me away. Not exactly, but he'd say, why don't you go up to New York or go see your sister in Italy? And I thought, I can go out. I can go to a restaurant in New York or walk down the street and look in an antique shop or go to a nightclub, the first, you know, you've heard of the Twist or something. Not that you care about nightclubs, and I don't want to go more than once a year, but Jack couldn't get out.
She throws parties at the White House to bring New York laughter and Hollywood irreverence to him, and then late at night,
you know, when you'd be in bed, you'd play records sometimes,
including the Broadway hits.
That once there was a fleeting wisp of glory called Camelot.
We had one this fall. What was it? It was Richard Burton.
And on the tape, she says, every night before the lights would go out, as he did since childhood, he'd say a prayer.
I often used to think whether it was superstition or not. I mean, you know, he wasn't quite sure, but if it was that way, he wanted to have that on his side. I mean, I know he wasn't an atheist or an agnostic. He never missed church one Sunday. No, he did believe in God, but he didn't, like all of us, you don't really start to think about those things until something terrible happens to you. And you know, I think God's unjust now. And I think he must have thought that.
Still ahead, her startling description of their marriage and the pledge she gives him on the brink of nuclear war. Most historians agree the closest the U.S. has ever come to all-out annihilating nuclear war was 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, brought about by a ruthless Soviet dictator, Nikita Khrushchev, masquerading as a jolly Russian peasant.
Yeah, it's just one gag after another. It's like sitting next to Abbott and Costello or something.
His wife was a communist apparatchik, too, in the words of General de Gaulle.
Méfiez-vous, c'est elle la plus maligne. Watch out, it's she who is the craftiest of the two. Yeah, she was a bit maligne, I thought. If you smoke, they say you shouldn't smoke so much. Russian women don't smoke. Or did you go to engineering school? You know, always trying to make themselves seem better. I suppose it was a chip on their shoulder.
At the first meeting in Vienna, she tried to create some kind of connection. While other dinner partners talked to him about wheat yields, she talked about the culture of the Ukraine.
How I loved all that, and the dance, the lezginka, and the kabarda stallion. And he said something about, oh yes, the Ukraine has now we have more teachers there per something, or more wheat. And I said, oh, Mr. Chairman President, don't bore me with that. I think the romantic side is so much.
It was a conversational Hail Mary that made her bring up the dogs, who had traveled on the Russian Triumph in space, Sputnik.
Oh, and then I knew all the names of those dogs, Strelkin, Belkin, like. So I said, I see one of your space dogs has just had puppies. Why don't you send me one? And he just sort of laughed. And by God, we were back in Washington about 2 months later. And 2 absolutely sweating, ashen-faced Russians come staggering into the Oval Room with the ambassador carrying this poor, terrified puppy who'd obviously never been out of a laboratory with needles in every vein. And Jack said to me, I had forgotten to tell him that. He said, how did this dog get here? And I said, well, I'm afraid I asked Khrushchev for it in Vienna. I was just running out of things to say. And he said, you played right into his hands, reminding the space effort. But he laughed.
Laughing, though no one is fooled.
To say that after Vienna that he really is a gangster. So everybody mustn't get deluded.
After Vienna, the newspapers said Kennedy had been out of his league, that the meeting was like Little Boy Blue meeting Al Capone. Khrushchev had savaged him. Everyone's certain some kind of test would come for the president who had shown such vulnerability at the Bay of Pigs.
It's going to be a cold winter. And he said that in, really scared. Then I think you'd seen just naked, brutal, ruthless power. And Khrushchev saw that perhaps he could do what he wanted with Jack.
First, there was the arms standoff in Germany. And then, there they were. Satellite photos in Cuba revealing Soviet missiles pointing right at America's heart just 90 miles away.
This call came through from Jack, and he said, I'm coming back to Washington this afternoon. Why don't you come back there? But there was just something funny in his voice. It was just so unlike him. But I could tell from his voice something was wrong.
What is the strategic impact on the position of the United States?
I hear them talking through the door. And I went up and listened and eavesdropped. I could hear McNamara saying something. And then I thought, well, I mustn't listen. And I went away. But from then on, it seemed there was no waking or sleeping. And I just don't know which day was which.
You can see the president's calendar, meeting after meeting with national security advisors, his notes showing how he is wrestling. Missile, 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 they say.
We will not prematurely or unnecessarily risk the course of worldwide nuclear war, in which even the fruits of victory would be ashes in our mouth. But neither will we shrink from that risk at any time it must be faced.
For 13 days, the president who failed to ask the right questions at the Bay of Pigs resisted pressure from the military and instead navigated the hairpin decisions as he tried to avoid a cataclysm.
I'm worried for my kids, mostly.
Are you planning on building a shelter?
No, I don't think there'll be time.
Well, that's the time I've been the closest to him. And I never left the house or saw the children. And when he came home, if it was for sleep or for a nap, I would sleep with him. And I'd walk by his office all the time, and sometimes he would take me out. It was funny, for a walk around the lawn a couple of times. We didn't very often do that. We just sort of walk quietly, then go back in. It was just this vigil. I said, please don't send me away to Camp David. You know, me and the children, please don't send me anywhere. If anything happens, we're all going to stay right here with you. You know, and I said, even if there's not room in the bomb shelter in the White House, which I'd seen, I said, please, then I just want to be on the lawn when it happens. No, but I just want to be with you, and I want to die with you, and the children do too, and live without you.
In the end, a combination of negotiating skill in the Kennedy White House and a secret deal to move U.S. missiles out of Turkey near Russia diffused the tension. Historians consider it a high point of the administration, and afterwards, the president decided to give everyone central to those days a calendar marking the 13 days of the crisis. He surprised his wife by giving her one, and she says on the tape, she burst into tears. In a moment, their marriage.
I always think our whole married life was renewals of love after, brief separations.
And her caustic observations about some revered public figures.
She geared everything, beginning with the invention of Camelot, to history.
It's a challenge of an oral history to search for the context of the time and the truth. You may have heard some quotes from Jacqueline Kennedy about Martin Luther King. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had told the president that King was present at parties involving a lot of sex.
And I said, oh, but Jack, that's so terrible. I mean, that man is, such a phony then. And Jack said, oh, well, he would never judge anyone in any sort of way. He never really said anything against Martin Luther King.
What you may not know is that Hoover planted another malicious rumor with Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby's told me Martin Luther King made fun of Jack's funeral. Well, I mean, that Martin Luther King is really a tricky person.
Brother John Lewis.
Congressman John Lewis, legendary figure in King's civil rights movement.
J. Edgar Hoover, he despised Dr. King. He wanted to destroy the man.
There is dispute on whether it's Martin Luther King who's on those FBI tapes or not. Robert Kennedy thought it was.
If you asked her what she thought of Martin Luther King overall, I mean, she admired him tremendously.
And there are caustic comments about another figure of the time.
I think people are going to read what she says about Lyndon Johnson and go, oh my gosh.
It's funny because she was really fond of Lyndon Johnson and really loved Lady Bird.
There she is talking about Lyndon Baines Johnson's drinking and saying as vice president he was barely there.
So, Lyndon, as vice president, didn't just do anything. But it was all right. It was fine.
Again, it's 4 months after her husband's assassination. She doesn't think Johnson is keeping control of Laos and Vietnam.
And so that's the way chaos starts.
And I think she actually liked LBJ at times, but will he be able to stand up in a crisis? So that was an interesting prophecy at the time.
And keep in mind, her brother-in-law Bobby is going to mount his own campaign for president.
I mean, Bobby and LBJ had this mortal hatred for one another.
So she and Bobby Kennedy are determined to make sure Lyndon Johnson doesn't take credit for her husband's legacy.
Talking about Lyndon, and people will think I'm bitter, but I'm not so bitter now. But I just wanted to be put in context the kind of president Jack was and the kind Lyndon is.
Still ahead, that marriage that has intrigued us for decades, and the fragile young widow who bears a nation's grief. It's not easy for all of us here in 2011 to remember who women were back then. Women standing between two worlds, the traditional past, the independent future. And so it is very surprising to hear what Mrs. Kennedy says on the tapes back in 1964, when she saw women on television asserting their own power, but believed they were on a kind of cultural suicide mission.
Treason does not pay.
Political wife and warrior, South Vietnam's formidable Madame Nhu. And then there's Claire Booth Luce, the celebrated playwright who wrote The Women, glamorous but tough. Mrs. Kennedy has a conversation with the president.
Madame Nhu, once I asked him, Why are these women, like her and Claire Luce, who both obviously are attractive to men, why do they have this queer thing for power? She was everything that Jack found unattractive, that I find unattractive in a woman. And he said, it's strange, he said, but it's because they resent getting their power through men. And so they become really just hating men, whatever you call that, like Claire Luce. I wouldn't be surprised if they were lesbian.
What have you done for the women according to the promises of the platform?
Well, I'm sure we haven't done enough, and
this is just my own sort of psychology. But Jack so obviously demanded from a woman a relationship between a man and a woman, where a man would be the leader, and a woman would be his wife and look up to him as a man. I always thought women who were scared of sex loved Adelaide.
She's talking about liberal female critics of her husband who supported Adlai Stevenson for president.
The challenge was
Not that there'd be the challenge with Jack, but it was a different kind of man. So, all these sort of twisted, poor little women whose lives hadn't worked out could find a bomb in Adelaide, and Jack made them nervous. But I mean, in my marriage, I could never conceive, and I remember I said it in an interview once, and all these women, we got all these irate letters. Someone said, where do you get your opinions? And I said, I get all my opinions from my husband, which is true. How could I have any political opinions? His were going to be the best. I mean, it was really rather terribly Victorian or Asiatic relationship which we had, which I think
the Japanese wife.
Yeah, which I think's the best. I mean, I get terribly emotional about anyone, whether it was a politician or a newspaper person who would, be unfair. But he always treated it so objectively, as if they were people on a chessboard, which is right. You may need to work with them again later. So it's the only way to be effective, which is one reason I think women should never be in politics. They're just not suited to it.
Japanese wife. Did you wince at some of them?
Oh yeah, sure, and I know she would have winced.
Women are too emotional for politics.
Right, I know. I mean, that's obviously not the mother that I, remember later on, and she was a huge booster of women in politics and women in the workplace. So I think this is, as I said, very much a moment in time.
So part of it was, I think, that she was so young, and part of it was a certain kind of romantic view of what a woman should be that to our modern ears sounds like, oh no, Jackie, you don't really believe that, and especially when we know that she becomes Jackie O later, a woman absolutely in her own right.
And there is something else that seems to echo throughout as we listen to the tapes. What we have now read about other women in and out of the White House, in and out of their lives, from Hollywood stars to women in Washington and women with shadowy and dangerous ties.
She must have known something at the time. Clearly you had to know then that something was going on. Women know these things. There's no way that you are as perceptive as Jackie and you're in the middle of a party and he's suddenly gone, that you don't know what must be going on. So you either decide, that you're going to stay with it, or you fight about it and you don't talk about it.
I always thought there was one thing merciful about the White House, which made up for the Goldfish Bowl and the Secret Service and all that, was that it was kind of, you were hermetically sealed, or there was something protective against the outside world.
We read about others in this marriage. Ever talk to you? Say anything?
Well, I think that was really between them. I wouldn't be her daughter if I was going to share all that.
Anything more?
Well, I know it's something that people are incredibly interested in, and that's just something that, that I've grown up with. I couldn't begin to answer all the things that people think because there's something new all the time.
I mean, what would she have gained by becoming one of these confessional persons who went out and talked about, oh, it was so hard, it was terrible, I was hurt. I think she carried her dignity right with her to the grave, and I think people admire her for that.
But it's one thing to stay silent and preserve your dignity, and another to live with that reality. There are so many ambiguous references on the tapes to mysterious fatigue, depression, sadness.
He'd always send you away, and when he knew you were tired. And then you come back so happy again. I always think our whole married life was renewals of love after, brief separations.
Much later, she was quoted as having said to a friend, "Whoever they were, the others, I was the one he loved. I always knew that."
I think she really was happy. She loved my father, and I think she knew that he loved her. And I think that as she became a greater and greater asset as in the world, as well as that they became closer. And so I think that their marriage really became happier and happier, and continued after his death to do everything she could to really celebrate and recognize how extraordinary she thought he was.
Oh, and I think now that he's dead, and the different people who come to me, you think he belonged to so many people, and each of them thought they had him completely. And he loved each one just the way love is infinite of a mother for her children. So he loved the Irish, he loved his family, he loved me and my sister and the world that had nothing to do with politics. He loved us all, and, I don't feel any jealousy. He had each of you. He really kept his life so in compartments. Mm-hmm. And you knew, and the wonderful thing is everyone in every one of those compartments was ready to die for him.
Coming up, his haunting words. "1963, in the White House, President and Mrs. Kennedy are studying the portraits of Abraham Lincoln.
It is the burdens, the way you look at Lincoln's pictures over the years and how much tighter and older he got. You can see that in Jack's pictures.
President Kennedy asks a Lincoln historian,
would Lincoln have been as great a president if he'd lived? He said that was his question.
Kennedy thinks he knows the answer.
What was better for Lincoln's that he died when he did? And then I remember Jack saying, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it all turned so fantastically, he said, well, if anyone's ever going to shoot me, this would be the day they should do it.
Oh, really?
He said, we'll never top this. Mm-hmm. Those things come back now.
As the first term is almost ending, they start to dream about their future someday, getting away from the pressures of the White House.
Then just towards the end, Jack was thinking about being either publisher of a great paper or, I don't know, Bundy said to me the other night that he thought he might have ended up in television or something. It just made me so sad because Jack could have had his happiest years later.
Still, so much to do.
I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
By now, his nuclear test ban treaty has passed. His poverty initiative's underway.
You could have just seen some of the good things. The Civil Rights Bill. And we were going to go to Kentucky sometime. I mean, I know it was mentioned.
Yeah, Appalachia.
That's it, Appalachia. If all this had to happen, I just wish he could have seen some more good things come in.
But there's a campaign for re-election ahead.
And he was so praying it would be Goldwater that he'd have to run against.
He wants a Congress that will say yes to continued weakness.
He used to say, let Barry alone, he's doing just fine.
They had other happy news. She was pregnant again. But then, in August,
Patrick Kennedy died at 4:04 a.m.
Patrick, born 1 month early, died from lung complications when he was just 2 days old.
In the hospital, he walked in the morning about 8 in my room and just sobbed and put his arms around me.
In November, they're ready to head out again. More hot dogs and handshakes.
Tampa, Dallas.
And something new for them. He wanted her opinion of a policy report.
On November 20th, usually he never brought anything home to show me from his office. And he said, this is the most fascinating reading. And he said, read it. And so I took it to Texas with me. It's been in my briefcase ever since. I've never read it.
They went to Texas because he's introduced a civil rights bill and it's causing a huge rift. Texas Governor John Connally meets them. As ever, she's a tigress about anyone criticizing her husband, and she has heard that Connally is gossiping about her husband's Addison's disease.
The day before Jack died in Texas, I said to him, I just can't stand Governor Connally. I can't stand his soft mouth. He was so pleased with himself, and he'd spend all our times in the car telling Jack, I guess, how far he'd run ahead of him in Texas. So I said, what's he trying to tell you? It seems so rude what he's saying to you all the time. But Jack would just sort of take it, yeah.
She wears one of her favorite suits. It's a copy of a Chanel. She had it made by an American tailor.
And then when I said that I hated Connally, Jack, so sweet, he sort of rubbed my back. It was as we were going to bed and said, you mustn't say that, you mustn't say that. He said, if you start to think that you hate someone, then the next day you'll act as if you hate him. And then we've come down here to Texas to heal everything up, and he'll make it all impossible. And Jack said, just, you mustn't think that about people. He said it so kindly.
Dallas, November 22nd. President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed here today, period. The president suffered a massive gunshot wound in the brain and was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. With no one attending him but physicians and nurses, he died without regaining consciousness or uttering a word. Period. Paragraph.
She has told writer T.H. White what she remembers. The blazing sun, the sound of the bullet, the puzzled look on her husband's face. Connally in the front seat also hit, yelling, no, no, no. She remembers trying to grasp a piece of her husband's skull as it flew away. She notices an eerie dissonance of his blood and those red roses. We do not hear Jacqueline Kennedy speak of those details on the tape. By every account, reliving it even once had been too painful. On Air Force One, the new widow is still wearing the blood-stained suit when Lyndon Johnson is sworn in.
Constitution of the United States.
Constitution of the United States.
Johnson calls her mother-in-law Rose. No tears, every inch a Kennedy.
I know you love Jack and he loves you.
And then she doesn't know the line has been disconnected.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Over the next 2 days, no one can imagine where she summons the strength to watch over every detail of her husband's funeral. She read about Lincoln's funeral, the cortege, and used the same caisson drawn by 6 identical white horses. And even though the Secret Service begged her not to walk out in the open, she walked anyway. His brothers walked, and 19 heads of state walked, led by General Charles de Gaulle, who wanted to show respect. It was her gift to him.
When you look at those images of her standing there, carrying the grief for a whole nation, at her age, 2 days planning, is it just stronger stuff?
She was my mother and I knew her, but I think that she did it for him and she knew she didn't have a choice.
She said that you were there holding her hand like a soldier.
As the tapes resume, she does talk about the weeks after the assassination, how she let many of their glittering old friends drift away.
So many of the others I can't bear to see because Jack's lacking. But anyway.
One night at midnight, she writes a consoling friend. Sometimes I become so bitter, only alone, I don't tell anyone. And when her little son John saw a photo of President Kennedy in Dallas in that car, he said, "Close your eyes, Mummy." While she's taping, he wanders in.
John, you went to the airport today.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yes.
John, what happened to your father?
So, he's gone to heaven.
He's gone to heaven.
Yeah.
Do you remember him?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
I don't remember anything.
Another letter to a friend. I always keep thinking of Camelot, which is overly sentimental, but I know I'm right. For one brief shining moment, there was Camelot. It will never be that way again. And in so many ways, the remaining years of her life will be alone. In 1968, Robert Kennedy is assassinated. She marries Aristotle Onassis in a desperate bid to protect her children and get them out of the country. But she comes home and, surprisingly, becomes a woman of the modern world, working as an editor, first at Viking, then Doubleday, living among the books she adored. Even telling Ms. Magazine, it's sad so many women of her generation were never encouraged to use the full power of their minds. When we come back, we tell you the last words on the tape. 17 years ago, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her brother-in-law eulogized her.
No one else looked like her, spoke like her, wrote like her, or was so original in the way she did things. No one we knew ever had a better sense of self.
She was 64, a grandmother, and she did not know that 5 years later, her son John would die when his plane crashed into the ocean. He was 39. Caroline left to guard their memories. She hears their voices still in her head.
If I'm in a situation, I can sort of imagine what she would be thinking right now. And the same goes for my brother, even more for him in a way. So when I find myself in a situation that seems peculiar, I definitely think about what they would think, what their take would be, or how they'd get through it.
What's the message she would most want to send about her life?
Well, I think she had thought of life as a great adventure, fell in love with somebody who broadened her experience immeasurably, and she created worlds beyond that. And I think she did that really by being true to herself.
Among the first ladies of the 20th century, probably only Eleanor Roosevelt had a greater impact on Americans.
She walked on that stage with brilliance, and that she was something.
She was our queen. She was our star.
8.5 hours of audio tape later.
I'm running out of superlatives now.
I think that's enough for today.
Yeah.
The conversation is ending. She talks about how easily her husband can sleep.
That's about all.
Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy starts to fade back into history, and then the tape goes still.
And a reminder, there are 8.5 hours of tape in the book. We could only cover a small portion tonight. There will be more on Nightline later and tomorrow on Good Morning America. We're so grateful you joined us, and all day long we've been thinking about phrases from one of her favorite poems about a classic voyage. Phrases that remind us to keep your thoughts raised high as long as a rare excitement stirs your spirit, and adds, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure. I'm Diane Sawyer. Good night.